So I'd like to introduce you, probably many of you already know Bill Anelli, who's one of the co-group leaders for the Modesto chapter. Bill is going to moderate questions with our speaker, Paul Wenger. So Bill. I'm just going to let you.
So I just want to say a couple words before I introduce Paul to you. I'm Bill Anelli, and I'm a transplant from San Francisco to Modesto. I grew up in the Bay Area, and 13 years ago I moved to Modesto to take a job teaching philosophy at Modesto Junior College. That was, there are very different cultures. Politically, in so many ways, they were different. It was very eye-opening. And when I heard, and I teach environmental ethics, and when I heard about Citizens Climate Lobby's bipartisan approach, building relationships, listening to the political other, you know, that was my dream come true. So, a key player in terms of passing legislation, I talked to Jerry today, I hope I can say that, is the ag sector. And so I think it's really important to understand how the ag sector views climate change and what they might be asked to do in terms of reducing emissions. So let me introduce Paul Wenger to you, who I think we're really honored to have Paul, given his stature in the ag community in California and nationwide. He's someone who can speak directly to how farmers will see these issues. Paul is former president of the Stanislaus County Farm Bureau. Then he was president of the California Farm Bureau, where he served a maximum tenure of 8 years from 2009 to 2017. He also served on the American Farm Bureau Federation Board of Directors from 2010 to 2017. Paul is a third-generation almond, not almonds are different, almond and nut farmer on his family farm in Wood Colony Nut Company in Modesto, like a mile from my house, a couple miles. His operations include sharecropping, custom farm work, and walnut hulling. Wenger attended Modesto Junior College, where I teach, before transferring to Cal Poly, where he earned a degree in animal science. He's dedicated his life to farming and advocating on behalf of fellow farmers. For instance, he was a guest speaker on Commonwealth Club Climate One in 2015. We're very honored to have him speak to us today about ag, public policy, our new bill. You know, I talked to him finally for about 30 minutes yesterday. He got back from Iowa from a Future Farmers of America meeting. While he's talking to me, he was working on his farm, I think taking deliveries or something. And, you know, so I threw it at him. Could he maybe also say something about the ag rebates in 763? So let's give a big, warm welcome to Paul Wenger.
Thanks, Bill. I guess you can hear me all right there. Usually my voice will find the mic. And thank you very much for having me. I don't bring notes. I'm just going to tell you I like to talk off the cuff from what's from the heart and the mind at the time. I've given a lot of talks in my life and had the opportunity to do it because of Farm Bureau, and a lot of people afterwards will say, could we get your notes of what you said? And I said, if you don't remember it, neither do I. But I try to make sure that what I'm saying is legitimate. So first of all, you know, Mary and Bill was out at the farm a couple of years ago now, I think, but we just had a great visit. And so I'm just going to lay a little bit of groundwork, because probably we all have opinions and stereotypical labels sometimes that we put on people whether we want to or not. And so I know Bill was saying, were you surprised there was any other Republicans in the room? And I said, yeah, I was kind of surprised. I figured I'd be the only one. But you know what? We're California. And so when you think about California, probably most Republicans in California are much more liberal than Republicans in other parts of the country, and probably even much more liberal than a lot of Democrats. And so we are a country unto our own. And, but I got involved in Farm Bureau because I could see that as we have transitioned from many, many years ago when I was a kid, if you would talk to anybody in your classroom, most of them had an aunt and an uncle or grandparent or somebody that farmed. And a few years ago, Dennis Cardoza and George Radonovich, they started the National Ag Science Center at the Modesto Junior College. And so I got to go there to speak, and there was a bunch of sixth graders. And so I said, could I see a show of hands, how many of you live on a farm? And there was about 100 students there, sixth grade students. How many of you grew up on a farm, have been on a farm, grandma and grandpa or anything? And I think out of those 100 students, there was 4 hands that went up. This is out of Stanislaus County in Modesto, and we're the 7th largest agricultural producing county in the United States. And people just don't know. And the other thing is that we talk nationally about 2% of the population is involved in production agriculture. In California, it's less than 0.5%. Actually, there's 80,000 farms in California, and USDA defines a farm as anybody that sells $1,000 worth of produce. So when you talk about corporate agriculture, yes, there's corporate agriculture in California. When you think about the wonderful company, if you've ever seen American Ninja Warrior and the pomegranates and everything, and so that's corporate agriculture, and there's a lot of others, and a lot of them are corporate. We incorporated a number of years ago an S Corp when 2 of our sons wanted to come home and farm, and so the corporate structure was better than just having it as an individual, as a way to be able to convey the farm and everything. So when we talk about corporate agriculture, we're part of corporate agriculture. We farm 700 acres. It was 350 up till a year ago when a good friend of mine passed away that I worked for ever since I was 13 years old, a neighbor of mine. He said, someday you're going to farm my ground. He passed away at 90 years of age, and the next day we took over farming his ground. So it really doubled the amount of acres that we farm. And his name happened to be Cy Young, not the baseball player, but the only American to have ever won a gold medal in the Olympics in the javelin. He did it in 1952, and he's very well known in Modesto. Very statuesque man, like a second father to me, and it just so happened he died the same morning I got done being president of the Farm Bureau. And so maybe there's things that happen by design. So what's a farmer today? We can go all the way from the wonderful company to somebody that's making $1,000 selling either locally, that's growing conventionally, organically, or in between, and I don't know what conventional is because 70% of the crop protection materials that we use on our farm are organic. We're all about, we hear the term sustainability and whatnot, but what is sustainability? It's really defined by the fact that you can stay in business. And in order to do that, you better be pretty progressive. I remember one day I was talking at a group, and one of my Farm Bureau members said, you know what? We've been there for 150 years. I think I'm going to say our family has been farming unsustainably since 1850 or 1870, whenever they were first there. And the fact that, we live in the house that Grandpa came and built in 1910, I think we're pretty sustainable. We started out as doing in the dairy business, grade B. Grandpa and my dad had 2 milking herds. They milked by hand, 35 cows at each ranch across the road from each other. And as things transitioned because of, sanitary reasons and refrigeration and the investment to go to grade A, we started getting into dairy beef. And so we would go around the rest of the dairies and get their bull calves, and we would castrate them, raise them up, and did home delivery beef until all of a sudden the government said, that beef has to be inspected. You can't raise that beef on your farm and have somebody come out and take that animal and dress that animal, take it to a local locker. It has to be inspected and all that. And the other thing that happened is that we had 2 household incomes. And so when both people in the household were working, it was easier to go to the grocery store and get the cuts of meats they wanted. They didn't know what to do with a whole animal or a half. And so as we started seeing our clientele getting into their 60s, 70s, and 80s, and they were making it all into hamburger because they really didn't want steaks or roast beef anymore, we said it's time to get out of the beef business, and so we converted over into almonds and walnuts. So 2 of our 3 sons farm with us. The third one farms, but he farms for a large insurance company overseeing some of their operations all around not only the country but the world. And but we're all involved in agriculture because we love it. So what is a farmer? I like to tell people that the only difference between a farmer and a puppy dog is a puppy dog quits crying after about 6 weeks. We're stubborn. We're stubborn because most of the people that are like me, and then the Farm Bureau would be just like this room right here. Although we would have a greater mix of Democrats, Republicans, and independents. There would be more Republicans, but there would be a lot of Democrats, and there would be a lot of independents. One of the things that I brought to the Farm Bureau is we started thinking about some of the issues that are before us, and that's why I thought I had to get off the farm and get involved into advocacy, is so that we had a voice. Because what happens in Sacramento and Washington, D.C., and a lot of other places are going to affect us on the farm. Because we're a wide open. You go down the road, you can look onto my farm, and you're going to see something I'm going to be doing. You're not going to know why I'm doing it, but more than likely you're going to have an opinion on it. And you're going to tell somebody, I don't think that farmer ought to be making dust. I don't think they ought to be burning their brush. I don't think they ought to be raising their animals that way. I don't think they ought to be putting crop protection materials on that way. There's a number of things, but you go by some of these great big tilt-up warehouses, you don't know what's going on in there. You know what they're doing. But today, with drones and with flyovers and with satellites in the air, there's nothing that we really do on our farms and our ranches that isn't visible for the public to see and the public to have an opinion on. We are a very few number of people that have a big footprint because we farm the environment, our natural environment that God gave us. And we're very lucky here in California to think that we are the largest agricultural state in the country. A number of years ago, we had the American Farm Bureau Convention down in San Diego, and Craig Hill was the president of the Iowa Farm Bureau. He said, would you come and greet our Iowans and tell us, you're the #1 ag state, and we're the #2 ag state. And I said, yeah, Craig, but I said, if you combined the #2 ag state and #3 ag state together as a state, they'd still be #2. When you go into Iowa, I had somebody once took a tour there, and they asked somebody as they were going down the tour bus, they go, what's that growing out in that field out there? And the guy said, oh, that's corn. And they're going down a little while later and said, what's that growing out there in that field? Oh, that's soybeans. You get going a little bit farther. So what's that over there in that field? Well, that's corn. Pretty soon, what's that over there? Well, that's soybeans. Pretty soon, the guy was kind of giving the tour said, let me just tell you so you get it straight. The big, tall green plants is corn, and the short green plants is soybeans. You don't need to know anything else. But being that I was president of the California Farm Bureau, I learned so much about agriculture that I didn't know in California. On my board of directors, when I retired in 2017, Blake Alexander is an organic dairyman doing free-range poultry with his kids. They're up in Del Norte County. Average rainfall, better than 85 inches a year. And fog, in fact, the atmospheric river that we had in 2016 into 17, they had 160, 170 inches of rainfall. Ronnie Leingruber is down in the Inland Empire in Imperial, California. If they get 2 inches in a rainfall in a year, they had a flood. Because it's hot, they can cook an egg. Well, they'll burn the egg on the concrete in the summertime. And yet, they grow crops down there that really fit and can only be grown in Imperial. And Blake Alexander does things that can only be done in Del Norte. And when you think about what we have, and so the Farm Bureau, we had 53 county farm bureaus that represented 58 counties we have in California. San Francisco doesn't have a county farm bureau, nor does Alpine. We have county farm bureaus. Some represent 2 and 3 counties together. They blended together, the mountain counties. And they get together for monthly meetings, and they're farmers like us. But the interesting thing about the Farm Bureau, it is family farmers. Some of them are first-generation farmers, a lot of them. We have so many first-generation farmers getting into agriculture today, it is unbelievable. When we talk about the future farmers of America, I was a state officer in the FFA. It used to be the Future Farmers of America. Now they call it the FFA. They still call it the Future Farmers, but they just went with the acronym FFA. But in 1974, when I was a reporter for the FFA, we saw our first urban agricultural FFA chapters, Future Farmer chapters. A lot of those kids, and they were from every color of the rainbow, every ethnic background, every socioeconomic, but they loved the idea of planting a seed or raising an animal and producing food and fiber. And it was so interesting to be down in South Central Los Angeles that was mostly African American, and to see these young people that they had to fence in. In fact, they would put their tomato plants and other things on wheelbarrows because they were afraid somebody would come in and steal the fruit or damage them. The animals, they had to go out on a school farm. But they wanted to know about agriculture. Now, a lot of them aren't going to be what I call a dirt farmer, but we need them in food safety. I mean, everything from the time that food or that product leaves my farm or another farmer's farm and gets to your mouth, there's a lot of people that got to touch it in between, because everybody wants to make sure the food they put in their mouth, whether it's, again, organic, conventional, whatever, is good food. So again, just to tell you kind of what we make up, we're also stubborn, as I said earlier. And let me tell you just how stubborn we can be. I'm the kind of a guy that we all talk pessimistically, but we live optimistically, otherwise we wouldn't do what we do. I'm the kind of guy, when my wife sets the garbage out there and it's ready to go out, and I pull my boots on, I'm just about ready to go out the door with it, and I hear her yell, "Paul, would you take the garbage out for me, please?" Hell no. Because now it's not my idea. I was going to do it and then come in and go, "Guess what, honey? I took the garbage out for you." But now I can't make that claim because somebody else told me to do it. What we're talking about here, when we're talking about climate change and things like that, it comes right down to it. When we talk to people individually and generally, it's two different things. When we're told to do something, we get our backs up. Maybe it's just us. Maybe none of you out there like that. But when somebody tells you to do something, you're going to bow up a little bit. Because you kind of want it to be your idea. Because you want to be part of the solution. And that's why I think what you're doing here with the climate lobby and having those kinds of discussions, and you know, we don't agree when Bill and Mary were out. And it's what I told people when I was president of the Farm Bureau, and we would go to Sacramento and we'd have them go to DC, and some of these people are like, "By God, we're going to show them, we're going to tell them." And I said, you know what? It's okay to disagree with folks. It's not okay to be disagreeable. So you go in and you visit. One of my closest friends in Washington, D.C. is Senator Dianne Feinstein. I mean, over the last 8 years, I don't think there was ever a time that I met her that I didn't get a kiss on the cheek, and if I didn't, I was like, what did I do this time? And I was castigated because I actually worked with Senator Feinstein, and we brought the Farm Bureau to work with Senator Feinstein. People can have your opinions. I know there's people on the left that think she's too far to the middle, and there's people on the right that think she's a lib, but she is somebody that you can talk to and work with, and she's going to challenge you. She's going to challenge you to be better. She's challenged us on water, and she's a great person now for trying to be able to manage our water resources, especially in the eye of climate change and global warming and the vagaries that we're going to have of really heavy rainfall and snow, and then periods of in between that we don't have it. And so how do we get through those times? And when it comes to labor, just a great stalwart for us on trying to fix the immigration problem. And the estate tax, because she knows that unlike just about every place else in the country, our land is worth something to somebody. And a lot of times it's a doctor, it's a lawyer, could be a school teacher, Bill, that wants to buy 20 acres and lease it to somebody like me to farm it so they can get out of town. But that's what makes up California. 350 different commodities. We are one of 5 Mediterranean climates in the world, and only 2 that really have the ability to capture rain and snowfall from up high and hold it into reservoirs to allow it percolate into the ground and other things. But you have the Mediterranean region, which doesn't get much snowfall and not much rain. They have the ability to desal. You have the south and western tip of South Africa. Again, not much rainfall or snow capture, some rain. You have the Murray-Darling Basin in Australia. Again, I was just there a couple of years ago with a Climate Smart Agriculture mission that Karen Ross, our Secretary of Agriculture, led. And as we met with folks there, they said any area that's upstream of the Murray-Darling, any single day of the year could be the wettest day of the year. And it might not rain there again for 5 years. So they don't have the predictability. And we were over there because we were looking at their drought, their 12-year drought, the millennial drought that they had, and how they dealt with it by separating the water title from that they had, the water license from the land. Not a good idea for California because it would just be traded on the stock exchange, and usually the farmers over there didn't get the water. It was somebody else for other reasons. So we were over there trying to say, you know, Australia dealt with their issues in their way, but we have a different way here. But we are a very ingenuitive state in agriculture and everything else. And so when it comes to climate, I'm sure you talk to most farmers, they're going to say there is no such thing as climate change or global warming, even though they know they deal with it every day. It's called weather, and it's what we deal with. But again, when you talk to them individually, they'll say, yeah, we know things are changing, and we need to adapt to it. We need to figure out how are we going to deal with it in the future. And when you live with one of the 5 Mediterranean regions in the world, and between us and Chile, the ones that have the ability to really figure out what our future is, it all comes down to water. And so when I talk to people, they say, hey, what is your thoughts on climate change? I'm going to leave it to brighter people to come up with the technologies that we will utilize as long as it is at a price point that we can afford. It's not a matter of if and when we're going to have electric-driven tractors. It's not a matter of if, it's a matter of when. It's a matter of when are we going to be able to take and store the energy that we are getting on our photovoltaic. When are we going to be able to store that energy that is going to be peaked at certain times? And right now, most people, we're kind of lazy. If we can just go on and we can fuel something with diesel or gas or natural gas or something else and turn it up and turn it down whenever we need it, that's pretty good. But the sun, when it shines, is going to make a lot of electricity, and we got to figure out when and where we're going to be able to store that and how we're going to store it. We're going to get there, and you know why? There's one thing farmers like, and that's flashlights. Because we do a lot of work at night. We have to fix equipment at night, we're doing livestock at night, we're irrigating at night, so a lot of the stuff that we do is at night. And I can remember when those first great big flashlights came out, they had a lens on them like that and a battery about like that, and it would last for maybe, you'd recharge the battery, and it would last maybe for 2 or 3 hours. So you had to have 3 or 4 of them. But then a little while later, it got a little smaller, and now you can have a flashlight, looks like your ink pen, that will light up this whole room darn near, and it'll last for about 5 or 6 hours. So the technology is getting there, and it's going to be there where one of these days it's going to be nice just to go out and flip a switch and take the tractor through the field and not have to worry about putting diesel in it. But as we're not there yet, we got to figure out how we get to that point. And so that's why we were talking about the initiative you have and Bill and Mary when they came out. And thank goodness we're having a discussion. And you do have a very bipartisan approach, but I said I'm just going to tell you a couple of things from my perspective, not to tell you that you're thinking wrong, but some of the challenges are going to have myself and my neighbors maybe having a little problem. In one of the things it says we're going to start with the upstream, we're going to put a tax on the upstream of the fuel pipeline, the petroleum pipeline. What happens to things that are uphill? They roll downhill, and that's where they stop. So everybody uphill has the opportunity to pass those costs on. I'm at the bottom. I'm a price taker, and Bill and I were talking on the phone the other day. Kathleen Galgiani, another great friend of mine, one day she said, I was giving a talk, and I was talking about we're price takers, not price makers, and she goes, Paul, you're going to have to explain this to me. We all have, if I go to work somewhere, I say, what's my salary going to be? You go into the store, you don't tell them what you're going to pay. This is what it is unless it's on sale. So everybody sets their prices. I go, no. I'm a member of Blue Diamond, and he said almonds or almonds. I usually tell people I'm bilingual, so you'll hear me say almonds and almonds, but back and forth. Some people call me a politician. I'm trying to make everybody happy, but it's almonds. They're almonds on the tree, and knock the hell out of them to harvest them, and they're almonds. So we will talk with almonds and almonds, but I said, I'll sell my almonds to Blue Diamond. I won't know for 14 months what I'm going to get paid for those. So my production expenses I already had to pay or borrow to pay them, and I'm going to start in a new production year, and I won't even find out whether I was profitable for 14 months on the prior. And so that's why we're price takers. For those of us that do direct sell, and we're trying some of that, just because it's a little higher margin but lower volume, so you can't really do all of it, but you try to do it just to spread your risk out. So if you go to a farmer's market, I'm sure most of you know, you probably pay a little bit extra at the farmer's market. But somebody's getting up at 4 o'clock in the morning to make sure they're there at the farmer's market, and they're going to stay there till noon or 1, and then the next day they're going to do it again. So they deserve a little bit more for what they're going through. And it's great that people want to do the farmer's market. It's a great way for people to get back and forth. 2005, petroleum prices went way up. So whenever we had somebody haul our commodities, they put a fuel surcharge because of the fuel they were putting in their truck tank on their diesel. They didn't pay it. I got to pay it. And it's funny, when the fuel prices came back down, the fuel charge went away, and their base rate was what it was before with the fuel charge. And so it never really goes down. And so what happens is, and this is just business, and I don't think I'm telling you anything you don't already know, or at least suspect. So if my costs went up, whether my labor costs go up 10%, they're probably going to go up more next year, so I'm just going to raise my prices 15% to those things I can raise. And so usually there's even a little bit more of a bump. And so that's why, think around how you do that. As you think through this bill, how is it that you do that for some of those end users? And some of those end users are people that are living on the very bottom of the socioeconomic level. Those people that are trying to get by on $25,000, $30,000 a year. And they're trying to figure out how they're going to put fuel in the car, they're going to put shoes on the kids' feet. All the products they pay are probably going to be paying that price. And so while the idea is a good one, I would just say really think through how you do this so that that can't be passed on, and I frankly don't know how you do it. I know how we did it in diesel. We had it to where a number of years ago, again, for state and federal taxes, you could ask for a refund for anything on the farm. And in your bill, I think it uses the USDA definition of farm. So any of the fuel that you paid taxes on, you could get that sales tax back. But you had to keep all your receipts, and you had to fill out the form, you had to do all that. I think I'm a typical farmer. I hate paperwork. And so I never asked for my refunds. And I think maybe there's some of that. And the state of California has a fund, because they calculate, or they have kind of a calculation, it's called the Unused Gas Tax Fund. And they actually utilize some of that money to help fund our county ag commissioners, because a lot of those don't have enough funds to do the things they do as they oversee the farms in our counties. So they use some of those unclaimed gas tax funds. Now, how they know how much went out to the farm, I don't know. But what we did on diesel, have you ever heard of red diesel? So red diesel is a dye they put in it, so we don't pay the tax from the get-go. So if you have a diesel pickup, and you can have a clear diesel tank on the farm, and you can have a red diesel that goes into your off-road equipment. If you think you're going to get by putting a little bit of that cheaper red diesel because it doesn't have the taxes into your pickup, they come through and they take straws on audits, and they'll go into that tank of your pickup in your on-road vehicle. And I got to tell you, from what I understand, it could have been put in there a month ago, and they'll be able to detect that dye. And then you're going to get nailed with a big-time fine. So we don't even put clear diesel on the ranch anymore. We just put red diesel into our tractors, and we go to the gas station for anything that's going to go into our diesel pickups. But this is kind of where we're going on some of this, is that you have to think about how do you do it so that we can accomplish our purposes, is to move people in a certain direction. And then one other thing, and then Bill, I'd like to take some questions. There might be some things that Bill wants me to speak about as well. But if you're going to try to drive practices of people through taxation, you might be successful. And I think that's in part and parcel maybe what's happened in California, as we see the price of fuel go up, although now all of a sudden I hear the fuel-efficient cars are kind of going out the window, so a lot of people are going with electric, but now they're all buying bigger vehicles for whatever reason. Maybe incomes are coming up and they feel like going up to the snow or something, they want to be in a Suburban rather than, you know, a smaller car. But I have heard that a lot of the automakers, I see it in the news, are getting rid of some of their smaller, more fuel-efficient lines. They're either going electric or they're going big. And so as taxes go down, you run out of that money that's funded a lot of programs. So it's a never-ending, it's kind of a, you get on that little treadmill or that roller coaster, and it's like, wait a minute, we used to have this much. But if you can through taxation drive people's actions, and you're successful, you're going to lose that funding source. And at the end of the day, we got to think about what is it that we're trying to accomplish. I like to hike. We've hiked all over the Sierra Nevadas. There's a group of us farmers that started hiking many, many years ago together. And so one day we were up on Mount Whitney. What are we going to do next? Let's do Kilimanjaro. So we saved up for a couple of years, and we hiked up Kilimanjaro. We left on the 16th of December, 1996. Missed my wife's birthday and my folks' 50th wedding anniversary. That's the kind of a guy I am. But anyway, I had permission from both of them. She was a Christmas baby. She says, that's okay. And my folks said, we don't want to have our 50th wedding anniversary right then, so you can do it when you get back. We got back on the 16th of January. We were sitting in Nairobi, Kenya, and I was looking at the New York Times, Modesto, California, underwater. I don't know if many of you remember when we had all that snow, and it rained clear up to 8, 9, 10,000 feet, and all that water came down and washed everything out. My friends, they're winemakers from the Lang twins from Lodi, and I'd called home. My wife said, you better have the Langs call their wives. They can't even get into their houses because it was all flooded over there. And so when you think about some of these big events that have happened, we've hiked Patagonia, Sikkim, India. We've hiked Peru, Salcantay, and that trail, the Inca Trail. And so we've had a lot of fun going around the country, around the world. But the one thing that I have recognized is it doesn't get any better in California. We hear about the broken delta. We hear about the problems we have in the Sierras. Folks, we have the cleanest water. We have some of the most pristine lands. Does it mean that we can just take our focus away from taking care of those natural resources? Absolutely not. But we're the most populous state. We're the largest ag state. We go from 2 inches of rainfall in the south to over 80 inches in an average year up north. We've got everything in between from east to west. I think we're doing a pretty damn good job. And so we need to really focus on the end game. And what is the end game? We're all concerned about the climate. I'm concerned about the climate. Number one, I'm concerned about adapting to the climate. And so it was interesting to read in some of your paraphernalia that water is actually considered to be green energy, but when you get to Sacramento, there's a lot of politicians that don't think water is green energy. They don't think reservoirs create, and so there was a bill that any hydroelectric power plant over 35 megawatts isn't considered green, but under 35 megawatts it's considered green. But I know this, we all need water to survive. The average person consumes the water that we consume in a day for our own personal needs is going to be anywhere between 25 and 50 gallons, not counting if you've got a swimming pool or washing your car. Do you know what our greatest usage of water, and this is what always gets me. I have people, I was down in LA and they said, you shouldn't be growing almonds. Almonds are a big consumer of water. We're exporting water all over the world. There's about 4% moisture in an almond when it goes around the world. Most of it stays right here in the photosynthesis cycle, goes back into the ground and kind of goes around and everything. And so it's just part of the environment. But people say we shouldn't be doing that. I'm taking quicker showers. If it's yellow, be mellow. Put a brick in your tank or your toilet, and you're going to save a lot of water. Does anybody know what your biggest usage of water is? Nope. You're consuming on average probably 1,500 gallons of water a day in the food you eat. Now, it's going to be as varied as agriculture. If you have more animal products, it's a higher water footprint. Boy, our livestock guys didn't like that. But I had to tell our livestock guys, you have a higher water footprint. So there's green water, water that falls as rainfall to grow crops, corn and soybeans and other things, no irrigation. There's blue water. Water that comes out of our rivers, our reservoirs is stored, and there's gray water, recaptured and reused water. But about a 1,500 calorie diet, and this comes from a world food site that I looked on one time, and they can vary because it depends upon what those calories are that you're, but a rule of thumb is a 1,500 calorie diet, which isn't a lot, takes about 1,500 gallons of water to produce somewhere in the world. A day. A 1,500 calorie diet. So if you sit down to eat a plate of something that's 1,500 calories, it took 1,500 gallons of water to produce that, more or less. And we were talking, I told Bill, I said, I like to talk in generalities. I said, well, you said it was 1,500. It depends upon if it's a lot of ice cream, and I like ice cream, or if it's, and it depends upon if it came from rainfall that fed the crops or if it was applied water. And, but we are today, with the technologies that we have, we are squeezing more crop per drop. And I'll just tell you one other thing. I was down in LA and I just got ostracized by being an almond grower during the drought. And it was in 2014, we shouldn't be growing almonds. And I said, well, it might have been after that. It was probably about 16. But anyway, it was just after the tsunami, and I forget what year the tsunami was in Japan. And they said, you shouldn't be growing almonds. And I said, I don't know what anybody did to help the Japanese during that terrible tsunami, but talking to the people at I Market, Hilltop, and Blue Diamond, their phones started ringing off the hook after the tsunami. And they asked the people of Japan, they go, what in the heck are you doing buying almonds? Your country is in an absolute travesty. And they said, we need non-perishable protein. Made me feel pretty good as an almond producer. So Bill, I'm gonna take a couple of questions. Bill's over here and he's probably got something he wants to ask me.
Thank you, Paul, so much for coming out to our annual conference. So we're going to take some questions if you want to line up at a microphone. We have 10 minutes. While we're doing that, if you want to know more about the Heartland, the issues in the Central Valley, and climate change, I just want to give a quick plug for a excellent panel tomorrow at 11 in the morning here in the theater. And it'll be the state experts on our forest management plan, state expert on water and climate, that's John Andrews, the director for the Ag and Climate, AgCan, and then policy associate for the California Air Quality Association. That's tomorrow at 11. And why don't we start with a question?
Just get a little closer to it. I think it's on. It's on, I think. Do it real close to your.
Yeah, just bring it closer to you. There you go.
No.
There it goes,
There
okay.
you go.
Suppose we could add sessions, something about climate change legislation to, say, commodity group conferences and something, an hour or something. What do you think farmers would like to hear about? Legislation or adaptation? How they can adapt? Or what do you
Well, I
think?
think the best way is, if you're going to herd cats, and farmers are like cats, move the food. And so tell them they have to do something, or saying, here's an opportunity. And some of that could be through carbon trading. I mean, let's face it, SB 35, or 32, we were very involved in that. And, I had two conversations with the governor, one at midnight on a Saturday night, and another one at 6 o'clock in the morning on a Sunday morning, because he needed a few more votes. And we were able to get those votes. And so with it, we were able to get some funding for people to replace their tractors with newer Tier 4 engines and whatnot. So you got to come up with a carrot, and people will go there. But telling you to do something like take out the garbage, but honey, if you take out the garbage, I'm going to be very happy with you tonight. Now maybe it takes a different perspective, So you want to move the food.
Thank you, Paul. When I'm in the country, I see a lot of wind turbines, I see solar panels. Is that a compelling thing to bring to farmers to say, this kind of bill will bring these industries into your area? Or do farmers respond to that?
Oh, farmers are putting solar everywhere. When you think about, a lot of times, gates, pumps, lighting out in the field, we're trying to run an electrical line out there and it doesn't really work to have a generator or anything. You'll see livestock operations and wells where the windmills anymore, they got a little solar panel there, and it'll, maybe it only pumps a half a gallon an hour of water to go into a trough, but farmers are embracing solar, and they're using it in a lot of ways, all the way from up in Modoc down to the desert. I've seen a lot of instances going onto their shop buildings and whatnot. So I think agriculture is embracing solar in a big way. Yeah.
Hi, thank you. I've heard a lot about cattle being a resource user. It seems to me, though, that a lot of cattle are grown on land that's not farmable in any other way. Could you talk more about that?
Yeah, I think where they're, most of it for the climate changing is really the manure and the burps. And that's what everybody's wanting to try to cover, is that we know that the enteric digestion of animals is, a carbon producer, and so that's some of the things that people are looking at. And so there is a higher carbon footprint. Again, I was on a climate website one time. I'd done a lot of time in airports, and so this chart, and I told our cattle people, we've got to figure out a way to offset some of that. But when you think about agriculture, the biggest part within agriculture is our livestock operations, our confined feeding animal units. But we're seeing now with methane digesters, part of the bill that we had was to, what was it, 1183 or something, to help larger dairies to have monies for methane digesters. So again, you want to limit it, have something that will help them get that methane digester in place. My neighbor John Fiscalini Cheese, if you ever had it, great guy, quick plug, was the first guy to put, that I know of in California, put in a methane digester, and he had nothing but problems. Because the Air Board, by the time he got the funding there was a couple of environmental groups that helped him fund it. But it says you have to have the latest technology. Do you know how quick technology is changing? It took him 4 or 5 years to get it permitted. And by the time he got there, they said, oh, you don't have the latest technology. And then part of it is the water. So you have the water agencies, the Regional Water Quality Control Board. They weren't happy. So we've got to figure out getting all the right people in the room. And I think you guys might be the ones to do it. Because I've got to say, I mean, everybody that I've read and seen, you are very bipartisan. And you're going to come into a room, you're going to talk. And it's okay to disagree if long we're going to the same end point. And I think we all are. But it's not okay to be disagreeable. Over here real quick.
Yeah, hi. You said something earlier that I was really curious about, and I think it's really important for those of us who are citizen lobbyists to understand. You said that if you ask farmers if they believe in climate change, they would say no. But what you did say was that privately, they are trying to adapt to what they know is coming. Can you address what the inconsistency is there, and so that we can really understand how that operates?
Yeah, we had one of our attorneys at California Farm Bureau, we were up in Northern California, and he'd made a comment sometime about, and he mentioned the word global warming. And he was quoted in an article, and we were up in Siskiyou County, and they wanted to kill him. You admitted there's global warming. We can't have the California Farm Bureau, an attorney for the California Farm Bureau. And it's like, so I always kidded him. I said, you're fired. But, you know, it's how you do it. And so you have a group mentality and you have individuals. And you know as well as I do that when you see a group, whether it's somebody demonstrating, walking down, demonstrating something, if you can talk to them individually, one-on-one, it's going to be a much different attitude. But they look over and they say, hoo-hoo, Jim's not going to like me if I say that I admit there's climate change or global warming, so I'm going to stay the course. But if you can talk to, so this, it may seem childish to you, but I don't think farmers are the only ones. Because I've talked to a lot of folks that you know, it's like, we can solve this problem, but we have our paid lobbyists. And I've always told people in Farm Bureau, we are our own best lobbyists. We shouldn't be paying people tons and tons of money. And yes, you've got to have the people there day in, day out in Washington, D.C. and others. The best advocates are all of us as individuals that go talk to our elected leaders because we're the voters. Oh, we're over here.
Our time's running out, so we have time for one more question. And then I'm going to put a quick question to you after that.
Okay, he's got 6 of you. You guys stick the line.
I had one earlier, so you should take it.
Okay.
Thanks. To your knowledge, are there farms doing CO2 sequestration through soil management? My understanding is it helps with water use and could help with adaptation.
Yeah, we could talk for an hour on that. I've had a lot of people out, so I showed Bill a picture a while ago. We've got earthworms in our ground like crazy in our orchards. And I've had a lot of environmental reporters out, and I said, you see all that on the ground? Do you see any leaves from our walnuts and almonds? Nope. But they see all this gobbledygook. Well, it's castings from worms. That's a healthy, dynamic soil. You know what happened when we brought those in because I saw a neighbor had them. We go out with the kids when they were small with rubber gloves and catch those night crawlers, and we put them in the field. Now they're all across the whole field. Number one, takes more water. We can give longer distance between our irrigation, but I have a 26-acre field. I could used to flood irrigate it in 5 hours. We have double line drip in it now, but I also still flood because you have all those roots out there that aren't getting from the double line drip. And it will take me almost 16, 17 hours. And the water just goes away. That's telling us a healthy soil. So think of it this way. If you have a sponge that's hydrated sponge and you pour water on it, what happens? It goes through. If you have a dry sponge and you pour water on it, it goes off. So our healthy soils absolutely hold more water, they take more water, they hold that water, so we can have greater distances in between our irrigations. But irrigation management, but healthy soils, I'm proud to say we've got healthy soils. If we didn't, we wouldn't still be in business. So Bill's going to kick me off. And
Well,
I've got one thing.
I just was told we have one more question after mine, so
Okay.
one person wants to come up. So here's my quick question, and Paul, we talked about this. We got the tax upstream, but then everybody gets a dividend check, so the public likes it. Everyone's getting like a dividend check every month. But yes, the means that fuel and commodities based on fuel goes up in price for farmers. But in our bill, if I have this right, farmers get a rebate for all the fuel they use. And we talked about that a little bit. And I think you weren't entirely happy with that. Could you say something on that? That's my question.
Well, it's just got to be ferreted out more a bit, like the plastic pipe that we put in so that we can have more efficient irrigation, petroleum-based. So if there's rebates or something on that, I don't know how it would work. But this is the thing, and I know it's great to get a rebate check every month. You know how much people move? I had one of my employees had an accidental injury during harvest, and he's going to be coming back to work here pretty quick. His first 2 checks were stolen out of his mailbox because his neighbors knew that he was on workers' comp, and as soon as those checks came. So how many times do people change their emails? I mean, think about this a little bit. To give everybody a check every month, how are you going to do it? Is it going to be direct deposit? I mean, it could be direct deposit. How many people have bank accounts? I mean, there's a lot of people, and I was surprised by this. How many people don't have bank accounts for direct deposit? So, things to talk about. I don't have a solution, just things to talk about. You said one more?
Yeah, one more here. Yeah.
Follow up to the carbon, I was just wondering if there's an opportunity to move the food for farmers with some kind of incentivization for carbon farming, for sequestering carbon in the soil.
Yeah, we talked about that a number of years ago about getting carbon credits. If you're going to plant an orchard, say almond orchards, life's going to be 25 years. You're going to sequester a lot of carbon. You have to figure out what you're going to do at the end of the 25 years, not to re-release that carbon. So it could be an income stream for you. But we also saw during the drought, folks in the South San Joaquin Valley didn't get water. They had to fallow their ground. So if I sold my carbon credits in 1 year for X, and then 15 years down the road, either it wasn't profitable to farm almonds, or my water went away, or for whatever reason, I got a disease in the trees, and I can't fulfill that 25-year obligation for carbon credits, now I got to buy them back, and it might be at 3 or 4X. So it's something we need to think about. I would rather get offsets. Have a bank, as a farmer, give me a bank, and then if I wanted to sell them somehow, or I could use them for offsets for my tractors and other things, is there a way you could offset them somehow? I don't know. It's going to take an economist to figure that out. But I told folks that were thinking they could sell their carbon credits by planting an orchard, be careful, because if you can't fulfill that, and then they're going to take it, a manufacturing plant's going to buy those carbon credits, but you got to fulfill it over the life of that contract. So lastly, because Tasha had a great, and I like, hopefully, and I think this is very appropriate as I'm walking up here, and I like it, is from Sandy Koufax. We are bound together not only by a single interest, but by a common goal. Our interests may vary a little bit, but I think our goal is the same, to have our footprint on this great earth to be the smallest it can be, to have it the smallest and where we can't, and we are going to have a footprint to mitigate it to the best we can. Thank you for letting me be here with you today.